Boy, have I been waiting a long time to do that. Cimoooooooo! What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. Now, today I'm bringing to you my meta-analysis for the June 12th, 2017 format. So, this is going to be a really interesting meta-analysis because this is probably going to be the last meta-analysis I do before we get to the North American World Championship qualifier. And this is definitely subject to change, and I do want to remind you guys that this is entirely subjective in my own opinion and analysis of how I feel the meta is going to shape up moving forward up until, the NAWCQ occurs, and basically up until link format is in effect. But it is very significant because, once link format comes, we're going to be having a drastic shift to the game, and it's going to be changing a lot of things overall. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring up that pie chart. So this pie chart might not look like significantly different from the last one, but there are a couple notable things that I do want to pretty much bring to your attention. So starting off, taking up the biggest piece of the pie chart is Pure Zodiac. Now, I do know that with the new June 12th ban list, we do have a lot of different stipulations here. We do have the fact that now Terratop is at 1. We have the fact that Norden is now banned, which means the fusion substitute combo is completely obsolete, and arguably Pure Zodiac was the deck that could mainly abuse that combo the most, because the biggest issue with other decks playing the fusion substitute combo was that they weren't really drawing any cards that were really putting that deck in an advantageous position from the fusion sub combo, whereas a deck like Pure Zodiac was loaded with a plethora of different traps, hand traps, as well as, quick play spells that function and were flexible to act as both going first and going second cards. So ultimately, Pure Zodiac was the deck that benefited the most from the fusion substitute combo. But now that that's gone, a lot of people argue that, this isn't going to be the strongest variant, and I have to disagree with that, because even though the fact that Terratop is still at 1, there's still 8 different ways to access your Rapier. We have 3 Barrage, we have 3 Tanky, and we have 2 Rapier as a total. But I think what you're going to end up seeing is that Rapier isn't going to be the sole heart and focus of the deck like it has been in the past, and that's namely because, there are still a ton of hand traps out, and Terratop really gave the deck this unfair dynamic, because if you couldn't stop the Terratop, the deck was just going to go absolutely ham. But now that Terratop's gone, the deck is very reliant on its normal summon in order to function properly. Unless you have Barrage, then you can kind of break the rules a little bit, but it was a little bit different when you have Terratop and Barrage and a Rapier or another Zodiac monster for that matter. So the deck is going to function a little bit differently, but what I think you're going to start to see is that we're kind of going to favor the OCG a little bit and follow in their footsteps as to how the deck functions. Now, what's going to happen is Rapier is not going to namely be as important. You're going to definitely see it maybe in the going first play, or you might have one chance to recycle the Rapier for another rank 4 play later on, but the deck is now definitely going to focus much more on the abuse of Zodiac Ram through the use of Zodiac Chakanine, and then you're also going to see, players might start playing cards like Pot of Desires, because now that the deck isn't reliant on a card like Rapier, the deck can play Desires. It doesn't really care about what it's banishing, because Rapier was the only significant piece of that combo, and so with Rapier either completely out of the deck, or you've used it to the fullest extent that you desire, you just play the Desires, you're going to get even more card advantage, more traps, more hand traps, more of your quick play spells, any of your just good basic utility cards. And that's really all there is going to be to it. Looking at it this way, it's going to be really interesting to see how players innovate their Pure Zodiac builds. I mean, in the OCG, they were making cards like Macro Cosmos, which can be really powerful, especially when the deck isn't so reliant on Rapier, because then you have just such more favorable matchups against your other decks, like your Dino matchup, your True Draco matchup, because those cards aren't going to get triggered if they're not sent to the graveyard. So playing these different interesting cards and teching them in, we're going to see some innovation to an extent on how these players play their Pure Zodiac builds. Now, the second most important deck I have on here is Kaiju Zodiac, and the reason it's here, it's kind of in line with the amount of players I'm expecting to play True Draco Zodiac, because I'm going to talk about both of these hand in hand, because essentially if one of these decks becomes more popular, people are going to flock to the other one to kind of counterbalance it, I feel. So the reason for that, let's start with True Draco Zodiac. So with True Draco Zodiac, what that deck has going for it is a lot of the cards that are very powerful against Zodiac, True Draco Zodiac can take full advantage of. For instance, they can normal summon Masterpiece, say if they were to get Flying Seed or something like that. Masterpiece doesn't care about Dimensional Barrier, and then you have a card like Dragonic Diagram, which can further abuse a card like Zodiac Ram in different intricate ways. And then you have the inclusion of Balbaboon and all these other different cards as well that, while they synergize very effectively with the Zodiac archetype, they can also cause consistency issues because now you're running these cards that might not synergize as effectively, or, you know, you can't use these cards as often as you might like if you were playing a pure Zodiac build. So that's why I feel True Draco Zodiac's a little bit lower down on the totem pole, albeit it's still going to be heavily represented in the meta as a whole. Now, on the other side of that spectrum, if a lot of people start playing True Draco Zodiac, I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people flocking to Kaiju Zodiac over the pure Zodiac build as well. And the reason for this is, you know, Kaiju Zodiac is essentially just pure Zodiac, except for the fact it's got the Kaiju engine already built into the deck, which means it has a very good game 1 matchup going against your True Draco Zodiac, your pure True Draco, anything that really just causes a problem for the deck. You already have the Kaijus in your deck that pretty much answer cards like Masterpiece. Hell, even answering stuff like Majesty's Maiden or even Dynamite Fighter can be very significant because you're denying your opponent the opportunity to gain that sort of advantage, and that can put you in a very advantageous position. Now, the downside to playing Kaiju Zodiac, and this is why I have it again just slightly below where I feel Zodiac pure is going to be, is because the Kaijus themselves are going second cards. You know, these aren't cards like Forbidden Chalice, My Body is a Shield, cards that are very effective going first and second. Kaijus are purely for going second, and so I feel that puts the deck at a slight disadvantage compared to pure Zodiac because it has a lot more access to its resources at a more immediate pace. And the other thing as well is Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. While it is a very powerful board wipe, it is susceptible to being just completely negated by not only My Body is a Shield, which is still a very popular card in the meta, but also Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which is something that like Dark Hole and Regeki don't lose out to. So while Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is still an incredibly powerful card, the fact it's at 2 and most players are playing Ash Blossom at 3 means that more often than not, statistically, your opponent's going to have Ash Blossom more so than you're going to see Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. That doesn't make Kaiju Slumber necessarily a bad card, but if you really need that board wipe to go through and it's a Kaiju Slumber and they have the Ash for it, then that just is going to put you in a very disadvantageous position and could honestly lose you a game if that's really what it comes down to. Now, moving on to the rest of the pie chart, I also do have pure True Draco on here as well, or True Draco Turbo, whatever variant you really want to call it. Masterpiece Turbo, more, you know, that might be more accurate. And the reason for that is this is just a deck that purely is meant to almost counter Zodiac in a way, because Masterpiece is just an amazing, powerful card, and the fact that if they don't have the Kaijus and if you're playing your cards effectively, the amount of draw power that this deck has is absolutely absurd. You've got 3 Demise, 3 Duality, you've got your Heritage, like, there's so much draw power at this deck's disposal, and the thing about it is, if you have that just honestly, if you can get to your Masterpiece before your opponent has the ability to really handle it, then it's really just going to flat out win you the game, and then it's all you really need. So I feel that you're going to see some True Draco Turbo players for sure. That deck also runs cards like Macrocosmos, which can specifically target Zodiac, as well as Skill Drain, which is a card that absolutely fucking wrecks that deck. And then you also got stuff like Lose One Turn as well, which the deck doesn't lose to at all because it's completely comprised of normal summonable monsters, whereas Zodiac are pretty much special summoning everything except their first normal monsters. So there's a lot of good tools that pure True Draco have that can really put them ahead, especially if they win the die roll and go first. That just puts them in a completely advantageous position. And last but not least, I do want to touch on True King Dinosaur, because even though this is the last and bottom of the totem pole deck for the meta decks and the meta analysis as a whole, this deck still has a lot of explosive potential potential, and going into the North American WCQ, I do really think there are going to be some very good players that are going to be piloting this deck, and if this deck is able to do what it's able to do, this is one of the strongest decks in the game, hands down, just purely because of what this deck is capable of doing. True King of All Calamities is an absolutely fantastic card, as well as having access to cards like Lagia, Dolka, and just the pure raw offensive capabilities of this deck really take this deck over the top, especially when you're looking at a deck like Zodiac that is purely comprised of all these really tiny monsters. If the players that are playing the True King Dinosaur deck figure out the deck and also figure out how to correctively figure out how to pilot it in this meta just totally swarmed with Zodiac and True Draco players, it's definitely something you should look out for. And at the very least, if you're not really, expecting to play a lot of it, have something in your sideboard for it, because you're definitely going to see a lot of it. So guys, that's going to do it for this month's meta analysis. You're obviously going to see more decks than this. This is just the pie chart demonstrating to you what you're going to see in a majority, whether you go to your local tournaments, your regionals, your YCS level events, as well as your WCQs as they come up. So keep that in mind. Obviously, the higher you go on the competitive scale, the more accurate I feel that this chart is going to be. But also keep in mind that, again, it is my own subjective opinion and my own analysis, so I could be wrong. And if anything comes up in the meta, whether there's a few regionals or anything that I feel is really significant enough to shift this scale or this pie chart one way or another, I'll definitely be sure to let you guys know. But guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video helpful, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.